Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode is kind of interesting in that, it kind of does a bit of a misdirect, and we do find out a little bit more about what's going on in the town of Crystal Cove at the present. So it actually opens up with a teen who is speeding on the road, and a bike cop actually winds up stopping him, but decides to let him off with a warning once he realizes the kid knows what he did wrong. And decides to just let him go and send him on his merry way. At which point we see a giant ghost truck appear out of nowhere and nearly run both of them over. At which point the cop proceeds to get back on his bike and proceeds to actually chase after it on his motorcycle and tries to get a license and registration out of it. But the ghost truck merely responds by knocking him over the side of the road, and he nearly goes over, except for the fact that he clings to a tree as he's going over. So he winds up being fine, but needless to say, his bike is completely smashed. But in any case, back at Crystal Cove Town Hall, the Mystery Inks and Daphne are actually going to pay a visit to Fred's dad, with Fred just telling the rest of the gang that he appreciates their emotional support, pointing out that it's never a good thing when his dad wants to see him at his office, and we do eventually figure out what's going on, and obviously Velma points out that Daphne would have wished she could have been here, and then just tells him to trust her. And yeah, we know that Daphne very much has a crush on Fred in this episode, and at this point we know very much that she has a crush on him, at least in this continuity of it. And but I don't think he fully has picked up on the fact that that's what Velma meant. But in any case, Fred Jones Sr. actually winds up walking out of his office, and tells him tells Fred the reason why he's there, which is that Fred Jones Jr. is actually going to learn the tools of the trade, as it were. He's going to learn how to campaign and do politics, which Fred points out he doesn't want to do, and that he's mainly because he's a kid, and that kids these days are actually just kind of think about traps and a whole bunch of other things that no normal kid would actually be interested in, because obviously that's just an obsession with Fred and nobody else. But in any case, Fred Sr. just kind of laughs it off and tells him that it's just a phase and he'll grow out of it, and then proceeds to hand him a brochure and tells him that what he wants Fred to do, which is to help him with his re-election. And to start, he asks him to print a couple thousand copies of the brochure they just handed Fred, so that they can actually hand them out to would-be voters. And with that, he then leaves and goes back to do mayor things. And while Fred is a little annoyed about the fact that his dad just basically told him to help him with his re-election, the Shaggy just reassures him that they'll get it done in no time, and they'll be back to solving mysteries very shortly. At which point Scooby decides to actually be the one to run the photocopier, and he kind of sort of does, but when he puts it in the photocopier and starts typing it in to make 40,000 copies, but obviously Scooby doesn't have fingers. So instead, the copier just kind of explodes ink everywhere. Ink just kind of bursts out of it, and the gang actually winds up taking cover behind one of the many knickknacks that are actually inside the town hall. But one guy actually does wind up getting hit in the blast. A man named George Avocados, or Avocados as he likes to be called, and that winds up becoming a recurring joke because it's spelled avocados, but it's pronounced avocados. But in any case, Avocados then proceeds to kind of vent his frustration at the gang for ruining his suit, and for just letting them run amok. And at which point, Fred Jones Sr. actually comes back and basically tells Avocados off, pointing out that this isn't the time or place for him. And obviously, Avocados corrects him on the pronunciation of his name and then proceeds to leave. At which point Fred, understandably, asks who the guy is, and what we find out is that Avocados is actually Fred Sr.'s rival candidate for mayor, and that he'll likely get elected if they're not careful, because and as he explains, his dad was the reason George Avocados is running for mayor is because his father, Theodore Avocados, was mayor a long time ago, but was thrown out of the position for stealing a diamond, which he remarks was never actually found. And George Avocados has been advocating for his father's innocence ever since. And to kind of add insult to injury, is trying to prove that by running for mayor again, despite the whole shady background that his father obviously has. So with that, they then proceed. So with that, the gang then proceed to kind of help finish up with the photocopying for the campaign, and proceed to get ready to go home with and also decide to actually pick up a pizza on the way home from the clam shack on the beach, with Scooby and Shaggy being especially excited because they've been looking forward to eating that pizza all day. And when they go to actually go and pick up the pizza, they discover that they can't actually get inside the clam shack to go get it. As we find out, the doorknob has actually been stolen. And also Skipper Shelton, he shows up and tells them that they made off with his doorknob, much like how a clam made off with his nose. That's why he has an eye patch on his face. He then proceeds. But in any case, he reveals that they stole his doorknob, and not only can he not serve anybody, or at least not help them pick up food, but to add insult to injury, he's stuck inside his own restaurant and can't leave because they stole his goddamn doorknobs. So yeah, disappointed. Scooby and Shaggy are just kind of ball a little bit, pointing out that they were looking forward to having that pizza. At which point Velma not so subtly offers that Shaggy come back to her house and that she could give him all the pizza he wants. But he merely remarks that they actually do have backup plans in case something like this happens, and that reveals that Scooby actually has an entire map of Crystal Cove tattooed on his tongue with all of the pizza joints in town. And then remarks that they actually have it covered, which Velma merely sarcastically remarks is covered in drool. So with that, they then proceed to get back into the mystery machine and get ready to go home, with the rest of the gang merely kind of remarking about how they seem to be missing other doorknobs as well. They also proceed to go pick up Daphne in this instance as well, who is currently knitting. Who we find out is currently knitting a new ascot for Fred. Also humming the Scooby-Doo "Where Are You" theme, which is interesting. Which is kind of funny, but or at least one of the iterations. I believe it's the theme. I know it's the theme song for one of them, but I don't remember which one off the top of my head. But in any case, as she's stitching a new ascot, she actually goes to praises her own work and points out that Fred is likely going to love the new ascot she's knitted. At which point she's called down into the living room by her parents, where they go and investigate, and what she finds out is a man named Ladderton, who, as their parents point out, is head to the Ladderton Ladder Company. And he actually does own the company now that his parents are gone. What we find out is that he's very self-centered. I'll put that first and foremost outright. Ladderton is very self-centered and is very much doesn't really care about the people around him. He kind of sort of flirts with Daphne, but it's very clear that he's just kind of self-absorbed. And he even offers her a pendant of a ladder as a gift for meeting her, but she merely remarks that she has her own pendant and pulls out the mystery inkish pendant that she found. The one that looks like the hourglass, the magnifying glass. She pulls that out, and with Ladderton really remarking that she should shoot herself and that she'll see her later, and then proceeds to actually just walk out of the building. At which point she proceeds to actually her parents merely remark that he seems nice and feels like he's a good fit for her, which she then realizes they're actually trying to set her up on a date with him and trying to set her up with him, which she has mixed feelings about, pointing out that she likes that Fred is very much the guy for her, but their parents merely just reiterate the point that they're just friends. With that, Daphne doesn't deny, but she does point out they're good friends and feels like it would be cheating on a friend, which she even points out feels a little bit hypocritical. But her parents merely tell her to give her a chance and that they're not asking her to marry the guy, but just give someone else a chance and find someone else who maybe has more of a future than Fred. At which point the rest of the gang actually picks her up and they get into the thing and catch her up to speed, where they reveal that where they kind of to catch her up to speed about how they went to the pizza joint, tried to pick up a pizza and couldn't, and for whatever reason the pizza guy was just kind of locked inside. They couldn't let Skipper Shelton out of his restaurant because he was stuck inside. But in case Velma and Daphne actually weighs in as well, pointing out that her parents have actually had a couple of their glass doorknobs go missing as well. And even Velma remarks that one or two have gone missing at the museum that she works at. So overall, there seems to be an interesting missing doorknob incident going on throughout Crystal Cove. But they're eventually cut off when the ghost truck shows up again and tries to run them off the road. And while they don't initially understand what's going on, pointing out that the ghost truck most likely is just trying to pass, when it starts ramming them and tries to push them off the road, that's when they realize they're in danger, and what results is an actual high-speed chase where the ghost truck does eventually push them off the road, but it only really succeeds in pushing them off to a lower road, so they don't wind up falling off a cliff at all. Which was the ghost truck's intention, and realizing that it needs to correct the situation, the ghost truck comes back and once again chases after them. With Fred actually putting it into drive and just kind of going as fast as he can, even chasing it through a tunnel with it, trying to bounce them off the sides of the tunnel. But eventually they do manage to actually get off the road, and the ghost truck just kind of passes. At which point they proceed to call Sheriff Stone and let him know what they just saw. And oddly enough, they decided they should let Scooby handle the police report, which is interesting. But in any case, Sheriff Stone is kind of dismissive about the whole thing. As well, he does point out that it's very interesting that they saw a ghost truck. He does point out that it seems like they stumbled across a new tourist attraction, with Shaggy being the first to voice his concerns about that, pointing out that the ghost that's likely just some guy who disguised his truck as a ghost truck to try and do something illegal. But Sheriff Stone dismisses all of that, pointing out that there was no driver, and that's classic ghost truck, and calls it a case closed, and then proceeds to get into his vehicle and leaves. At which point Fred notices something on the side on the road that he didn't notice before, and proceeds to ask Daphne for her camera phone, which is a very old phone, and it's implied that this is like set in the 1980s. So yeah, this isn't set concurrently with the show's airing. This show is very much set back in the 1980s. It's heavily implied because there's a lot of dated technology in the show, and it's implied that it's set then and not now. But in any case, he pulls out her camera phone and proceeds to snap a picture of what he thinks he saw on the road, and proceeds to actually present it to the rest of the gang, which they realize there's tire tracks. And obviously, the gang pick up the very obvious clue there, which is that ghost trucks don't leave tire tracks. So they point out that it likely isn't a ghost truck at all, but somebody who painted their truck to look like a ghost truck. So yeah, with that, they then realize that there likely is a mystery on their hands, but that conversation winds up getting cut short when Fred suddenly receives a call on Daphne's phone, and he picks it up, and it's revealed that Ladderton is actually on the other end of that call. Interestingly enough, Rung reveals that they're actually going to get I have a date at the Bloody Steak, which is a steak restaurant. And also it's very vampire themed, as we find out later. But in any case, Fred kind of hits it off with the guy and kind of hangs up and points out that he seems nice, and while Daphne tries to deny the fact that she's going on a date with another guy, Fred being completely oblivious to Daphne's feelings for him, then remarks that he's merely a nice guy, and then just gives the date his blessing, much to Daphne's chagrin, since she doesn't realize Fred doesn't kind of realizes that she has feelings for him. So he then points out that he seems nice, likes the restaurant that they're going to, and then proceeds to give her recommendations on what to order while they're there. So Daphne kind of nonchalantly thanks him, and then, or rather, she kind of half-heartedly thanks him, and then they all proceed to get back into the vehicle and proceed to actually continue to go back and help Fred Sr. with his campaign, doing more of his campaign stuff. At which point they notice that the doorknobs in the town hall are actually missing as well. At which point George Avocados shows up and very ominously remarks that there wouldn't be any missing doorknobs if he was mayor, and proceeds to walk off, with Shaggy merely remarking that guy gives him the creeps, and Scooby kind of gets very shivery, and remarks that it is creepy, and then proceeds to leap into Scooby's arm, and Shaggy merely tells him that's a figure of speech. But then Velma kind of picks up on the fact that maybe Scooby's onto something, and points out that George Avocados obviously very much benefits from the fact that all of the doorknobs are missing, because as George Avocados himself admits, missing doorknobs means unhappy voters, which means obviously they're going to try and re-elect somebody else. And Fred, agreeing with Velma, decides that the best idea is to actually build a trap and see if they can actually catch George Avocados in the act. So they do exactly that, and I'm not going to go into finer details of the trap, but long story short, the trap just, again, watch the episodes. Watch the actual episodes and don't watch my reviews of them, but long story short, they set up a trap that is another Rube Goldberg contraption, which traps people which, as we find out later, traps people in a net and proceeds to dangle them over a shark tank. With once again Velma remarking that it sure would have been nice if Daphne was there to help set up the traps, pointing out that she was missing out on all the excitement, although kind of sarcastically she puts it. But Fred merely remarks that he hopes she'll have a fun time on her date. At which point they actually get a call from Angel Dynamite, who actually ran the tire tracks for them, and points out that there was only 2 people who actually ordered that kind of tire. One is a name which is kind of so long and comical that it's impossible for people to actually take it seriously, and it's just like I forget. I believe it's I think it's like GN Tell or something. I don't know, but it's not important. But in any case, the other name that they actually notice on it is George Avocados, and they realize that George Avocados was likely the person who bought the tires, and points out that there is indeed a stolen doorknob thing, and George Avocados obviously benefits from that, then the likelihood is that the 2 incidents might actually be related. And when Shaggy gets confused, she merely remarks it's more like they're the same person. At which point Fred Sr. actually winds up getting caught in Fred's trap, and is annoyed about the fact that he's caught in a trap, and actually tells them to let him out. And at which point Fred tells his dad that that obviously they think George Avocados is the ghost trucker, with obviously Fred Sr. completely rebuking that claim, pointing out that obviously ghosts don't need to drive. So he points out that is completely preposterous, and that their imagination has got the better of them. So and tells them that, and at which point they decide to actually go off and go look into it for themselves, and then proceed to actually go and follow George Avocados when they see him leaving, and decide to actually go follow him and figure out where he's going, since obviously he's suspect number 1 at this point. And they just kind of leave Fred Sr. hanging over the shark tank, which is kind of hilarious. But they then proceed to actually follow George Avocados in his car, and they follow it through the fog, with them noting that it's very thick as pea soup and they can't actually see. But eventually they do come across the ghost rig, where they find out that the ghost rig, but notably the ghost trucker hasn't seen them yet. And Velma actually decides that since the ghost rig is just kind of sitting there, they might as well get out and take a look. With obviously Scooby and Shaggy are completely against that whole idea. And they decide to actually get out and investigate it against their will, because Velma just kind of drags them out of the truck. At which point they go investigate the ghost truck, and discover A, that it's painted to look like it's positively ancient, and B, the tires are brand new. At which point Fred wonders what else they can actually look into, and at which point the ghost truck activates and proceeds to actually chase after them. So they get back into their car and actually chase after them. And I should mention there's some pretty good driving from Fred, and he winds up driving away from the ghost truck completely in reverse. So he winds up escaping from the ghost truck once it tries to run him off the road, which is kind of interesting. But in case as this is happening, Daphne is actually sitting in the blaze stake, waiting for Rum Ladderton to show up, and remarks that she's been there so long she's actually had several orders of finger fries as an appetizer, and she's kind of thinking that Rum Ladderton actually stood her up. But in any case, as the then comes back to the ghost truck actually chasing after Fred, and Fred actually winds up pulling it off the road so that the ghost truck actually doesn't see him. And tells the rest of the gang to actually hold their breath so that they don't actually make a sound. Which they do, and the ghost truck actually winds up driving off and completely passing them because it doesn't see them because they wind up pulling into a spot and turning the lights off. So it doesn't see them, and it drives away. At which point they then proceed to wonder if there's actually any more information they can actually share, and realizing that they now have a bit more information about what's actually going on, they decide to actually go and inform Daphne, who at this point is actually sitting down with Rum Ladderton, who just kind of shows up, stating that his day ran long, and proceeds to then help himself to Daphne's entree like a dick. So she's obviously not the biggest fan of Rum Ladderton, and I'm not a big fan of him either. Watching this episode, he's very self-centered and doesn't very much care for Daphne's feelings, like, at all. He literally just helps herself to her entree in this scene, and it's kind of terrible. He's kind of a terrible person, but in case the rest of the gang actually shows up and tells Daphne what they found out, and at which point they realize that they actually have company, and Daphne introduces themselves to Rum Ladderton, and he and Fred, interestingly enough, actually wind up hitting it off over their mutual love of ascots. And they actually wind up exchanging ascots at some point, and while the rest of the gang actually clues Daphne in as to what exactly it is they found, and Daphne is also visibly annoyed by the fact that Fred took his ascot off, pointing out that according to herself, Fred apparently told her off screen that he never takes his lucky ascot off, except for this apparently one exception. So for that reason, she's a little annoyed and a little confused as to what's going on. But in case Rum does point out that he has to get on his way, and proceeds to actually head out, but points out that he also forgot his wallet and tells Daphne to pay. So he leaves, and with that he just leaves. So yeah, not the nicest guy. You're supposed to pay for your date, but in any case he just leaves, and at which point they point out that since they're there, they might as well order something. So Scooby actually picks up Rum's letter menu and tries to actually read through some of the entrees, but they actually wind up finding a letter inside the menu, and it's at this point where they actually pick it up and and Velma recognizes the seal and points out that it's likely that she has a very bad feeling about it, but and in any case it is indeed from Mr. E, but who has left them a CD as well as a kind of a cryptic clue about how they're actually going to solve the last piece of the mystery. He points out that Mystery just kind of tells him that's to follow the fog, and then leaves them a very cryptic clue about how crystals don't open as many doors as diamonds. Which they point out is either really helpful or not helpful at all. But in any case, they decide to actually follow his advice, to actually go and follow Mr. E's advice, and actually wind up following the tire tracks from the ghost truck to a cliff face where Shaggy remarks that they seem to actually disappear and leave the road rather quickly, with Velma remarking that it doesn't seem like they left at all, or rather they completely vanished. And after seeing they run into the cliffside, remarks that it's probably a secret passage and that they'll need to actually go find it. And so the rest of the gang actually winds up splitting up to go find it. Daphne actually winds up finding the lever to actually open the puzzle that opens the door. When she actually winds up getting startled by some bats that fly out, but she does find the lever, which opens it. Then they find a Then they find one of those, what are they called? They mask the shape in the hole puzzles where they put the 2 keys into the door, which causes another slab to open underneath Scooby's feet, where he sits on it, and that winds up opening the door. And they then proceed to actually start exploring the secret cave with Velma kind of romantically suggesting that it could be her and Shaggy's new hangout, and Shaggy is kind of returns that sentiment, pointing out that it could just be him and her, but then he trails off when he notices all the huge pile of doorknobs sitting around, and they then realize that this is likely where all the missing doorknobs have been hiding, and they eventually find a journal from Theodore Avocados. He appears posthumously in the scene, but he does exist. And what we find out is that in his journal, he reveals that he was indeed the guy who stole the diamond, but the diamond is but they don't have much more info on that. But they then remark that it's more likely that. But then Velma remarks that the mystery seems to be wrapping up because now they have most of the clues and are able to kind of conclusive evidence to actually figure out what they're actually supposed to do to actually find out how to finger the guy. But it's at this point where the ghost rig actually winds up turning on again, and they get back into the mystery machine and drive off before the ghost rig can run them over. And once again, some more impressive driving from Fred. The ghost truck actually winds up chasing him in the town and tries to run them over. And through very impressive driving from Fred, they will actually wind up driving on the roofs a couple of times at one point, which by using some construction equipment as ramps. But eventually they realize that they're not going to be able to shake the ghost truck, and Daphne asks what they're actually supposed to do, and Fred remarks that the only thing they can do is lead it into one of his traps. So with that, they then proceed to lead it back in the town hall, and he asks Scooby to set up the trap from the back seat, which he does. They set it off from the bed of the mystery machine, and it winds up and after setting up the trap and leading the ghost truck up the stairs, they eventually manage to flip the ghost truck over using the Rube Goldberg contraption that they made, which normally is supposed to dunk somebody into a shark tank, but here it just kind of flips the ghost truck over, and the ghost truck just kind of lands upside down. At which point, the rest of the Mystery Inc. actually winds up emerging from the mystery machine and celebrating a job well done, with Fred Sr. emerging from his office, remarking that he just heard something very scary and dangerous, and like there was some sort of ghost tearing up City Hall, and then completely shifts his tone, and eagerly asks his son if it's absolutely true, and while Fred denies the fact that it actually was a ghost, he does remark that they actually caught the ghost trucker, and is about to tell him that it's George Avocados when Rung Ladderton falls out of the driver's seat. So yeah, as it turns out, and as Velma figures out the last pieces of the clue, she figures out that Rung Ladderton was indeed the one who actually bought the tires, and that the made-up name I mentioned earlier is actually just Rung Ladderton spelled backwards. So yeah, not the best alias you could have. But she then also points out that Rung Ladderton, based on the journal that they found, Rung Ladderton has actually been looking for the doorknobs and has been actually smuggling them out of Crystal Cove, because according to Theodore Avocados' journal, one of them is the actual diamond, but at which point Rung Ladderton clears up the remaining details, pointing out that while yes, it is true that one of them is the diamond, but he also points out that that the journal doesn't explain which one, so he just took them all. And to be fair, stealing crystal doorknobs is illegal. Is illegal in itself, but yes, but yeah, he couldn't find the actual stolen diamonds because obviously Theodore disguised as one of the doorknobs and didn't specify which, so he just took them all. But when Fred obviously points out his confusion, pointing out that Rung Ladderton is obviously rich and has no real need to actually steal doorknobs, or much less a valuable diamond, Rung Ladderton then proceeds to point out the inherent problem with owning a ladder company. Nobody replaces their ladders, which means sales go down the toilet quickly. So yeah, and that's a very good point. You don't replace you can't really replace a ladder. I mean, ladders are kind of built to last. You use them for all of your things. So obviously, Rung Ladderton stole the diamond because the company's flat broke because it doesn't sell enough ladders. So And with that, he's then arrested and is then hauled off by the police. But before he leaves, Daphne actually winds up plucking Fred's ascot from around his neck, and then returns it to Fred. With Fred remarking that he's happy happy to have his ascot back, and remarks that he didn't want that he's happy Daphne is there to return it for him, but she merely remarks that she'll always be there for him, and not so subtly implies that in a romantic context. But once again, Fred doesn't fully pick it up, and she remarks, "Yes, I am right here." She's it's like, "Yes, I am here. I am a very available, beautiful young woman that is interested in you. Please date me, please, Mr. Fred Jones Jr., sir." So yeah, but in case with that, Fred Sr. actually winds up comforting his son and points out that for once his traps actually wound up coming in handy. With Fred remarking that he's glad his dad approves of his love of traps, and remarks if that's finally a sign that his dad actually approves of what he wants to do, and Fred Sr. just kind of laughs it off and tells him no. But as compensation for the fact that they actually wound up finding a genuine doorknob thief and possibly a diamond thief as well, he decides to hold a giant campaign and a giant campaign speech in the gang's honor, remarking that while they did cost the town another tourist attraction, he does point out that they wound up finding a missing diamond, which would help with the added revenue to the town, and then to add to that, he then temporarily makes Scooby chief of pizza at the end of the episode, which I think is kind of funny. But yeah, this episode. But in any case, yeah, this episode is just kind of interesting, and that's well, long story short, we find out a little bit more about Crystal Cove itself, which is that it's apparently in the midst of a re-election campaign, and Fred's father may or may not win if George Avocados actually gets his say. So yeah, I do think that is gonna be interesting. I think that's gonna be like a recurring thread going on in the background, where Fred Judge Sr. is going to have to fight for his re-election, and obviously, since the town is in the midst of a re-election, that's going to pose some interesting questions going down the line. And also, it's interesting. What's interesting here is that Mr. E once again shows up and leaves them a clue. Yeah, it is just interesting that Mr. E is still once again helping the gang. This time by helping them fill in the missing blanks for their puzzle that they were trying to solve. But which is interesting, and I am interested to see more of him, because he hasn't shown up in an episode yet, but he has left them some cryptic clues, and I am interested to see where else he actually winds up helping the gang, because obviously he is interesting, and he's just kind of helping the gang from the shadows, and I am interested when we're eventually going to formally meet him. So yeah, that is very interesting. But in any case, yeah, that's my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well if you want to help us support the show. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks, and I'm always saying thanks. So just be sure to go check this out. Link is down in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And also, just be sure to go check out my videos linked in the end screen as well. Top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is based on what you've already seen. So if you want to try both of those videos out, by all means, link is just on the end screen. Go see those. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!